And one more annotation we have. That annotation is what? @inject. It is not making available here. @inject. Go to build path and add J2EE jar files. JBoss J2EE. We have multiple J2EE implementations here. Okay, just I'll go through all these jars. Use here @inject. Yes, now it is making available. @inject. So @inject is similar like your auto-void only. So by using this @inject also you can do auto wiring here. Run. Yep, by using inject also we can do dependency injection, but here it is not getting any ambiguity problem here. Why? We have two engines, engine 1 and engine 2. So if it is a by type, it need to get ambiguity problem, right? So first it is using by name, I think here, similar like your resource. Actually it need to get ambiguity, but that name, if it find along with name, that name also it is using here. So then you can consider it is using by name. In case if it not find, like if it find two eligible entries E1 and E2, by using name, I mean if you don't have any name with the same reference name, if you have reference IDs, different reference IDs here, so then which reference it need to inject? So ambiguity. Multiple, no unique bean, expected single but found 2. So now in this case what it is using here? By type also using here, right? So to reduce this type ambiguity, we need to go through @qualifier. So qualifier annotation also we have in JDK. Qualifier is not allowed in this location. Then where? Okay, go through Spring qualifier annotation, Spring qualifier, and you can pass qualifier reference E1. Yeah, now run client class. So that qualifier is only for reduce type ambiguity. Okay, by using qualifier also, I mean you can help that inject annotation to find out the required bean reference. Okay, and these annotations are recommended. Resource and inject annotations are recommended instead of auto wiring annotation. Why these are recommended? These annotations given by Sun. These annotations are Sun specific annotations, not a framework specific annotations. In future, if you want to remove Spring dependencies, again if you want to make that application as a EJB application, in that case without affecting your classes, it will do auto wiring by using EJBs also. From EJB 3 onwards, EJB 3 also it is similar like your Spring only. EJB 3. In EJB 3.0 we have this dependency injections and all these topics. Okay, so by using EJB 3 also you can execute your application. By removing your complete Spring jar files, you can execute that application whatever the application you build by using Spring, that same application you can execute by using EJB dependencies also. Okay, in future if Spring announce my jar files are not free, you have to buy a license. If they announce like that, then you no need to go through Spring. You can simply remove that jar files and you can add Sun given EJBs. EJBs are free, right? So by adding this Sun given EJB3, you can run your application on Tomcat also. From Tomcat 7 onwards, they given this support. Okay, so on top of Spring annotations, they given J2EE annotations. So instead of using Spring annotations, you better to go through Sun annotations only here. So this inject annotation and resource annotations are recommended. Okay, instead of using auto void, you can go through inject or else you can go through resource. And we have one more annotation here. We discussed about component annotation, right? Stereotype annotations. So the benefit with this stereotype annotations is what? By using auto wiring, we can reduce number of property tags in XML file, and manually we don't need to do any dependency injections. So a lot of burden it will reduce on developer here. But must we need to create that bean class objects, right? So once again, why stereotypes we have to use here? If you build application by using some classes like controller classes, like 1000 controllers, controller 1000, and each controller if it have a respective business class, business 1, business 2 and business 1000, and each business class if it contains a DAO class, DAO1, DAO2, DAO3. And here by using auto wiring, let's say if the business 1 if it contains DAO1 dependency, by using this auto wire, simply you can inject this object here. The same annotations I can use throughout application, and automatically I can inject these objects here. But who need to create these objects? We have to create, at least you have to configure that bean classes under Spring XML file, right? Inside this Spring XML file, you no need to do dependency injection, but you must need to create bean objects here. So compulsory you need to create controller 1 object and the class name C1. And like that, how many controller beans we need to create? You have to create up to 1000 controller beans. Class name C1000. And in the same way you have to create business classes, all the business class objects 1000 times, and you have to create DAO class objects. So at least you need to create 3000 bean classes here. But dependency injections we don't need to do, automatically it will inject by using auto wiring. At least you have to create these all bean classes objects in Spring XML file, right? You have to declare here. So 1000 times you need to write this bean tag here. And finally this one we need to load it into IOC. IOC it need to read all these 3000 tags. It need to load it into parser, and it need to parse all these tags, and then after it need to create your bean objects. So instead of creating beans by configuring here, by using stereotype annotations also we can create. Stereotype annotations, stereotypes we have, right? So we have stereotype annotations @component, @component, and we have @controller, and we have @repository, and we have @service. These are 4 stereotype annotations. Actually, where we have to place this controller? On top of controller classes, and repository we have to keep it on top of DAO. Service class we need to use it on top of business, and the component it is for plain simple Java classes. Okay, controllers also you need to write POSOs, DAOs also need to be POSO, business also should be a POSO class. But if it is not a controller, DAO and business, They will provide some special capabilities to your classes. If it is a controller, it will provide HTTP object here. If it is a repository, it will provide some transaction capability here. If it is a service, it will provide securities and all this here. Okay, so they will provide some special capabilities to your classes. But if it is a component, you need to use it for only plain Java class. It will not provide any additional capabilities. Okay, so here for this controller classes, if you use here controller on top of class, you need to keep it. And for these business classes, if you use here service, and for your DO classes, if you use repository here, then here you no need to create that 3000 bean objects. If you go through annotations, you no need to create your bean classes objects here. Just you need to scan your base packages. Instead of creating 3000 bean classes objects here, just you need to scan that base packages. Let's say this controller classes are there in controller package, and if these business classes are there in BO package, and these DOs are there in DO package, just we need to scan that packages by using namespace. Which namespace we have to use here? XML NS. We have to use context namespace. Then by using this context namespace, you can do auto scanning. Context colon component scan and base hyphen package, base package name. So how many packages we have? Controller we have one package, and the same thing base package BO, and we have one more base package DAO. That's it. By scanning all these packages, it will create here 1000 controllers and 1000 business and 1000 DAO class objects, and later it will do the dependency injections into required classes by using auto wiring. So here you can reduce that number of tags, right? We can reduce number of tags. We don't need to create manually bean objects here. Spring will take care about object creations, and by using auto wiring, automatically can do the dependency injections. So instead of using auto wiring, now we know two more annotations, resource and inject. So by using resource and inject also you can do auto wiring here. And to activate that resource and auto wire and these annotations, you have to use one more tag here, context colon annotation hyphen config. By using this one, you can activate up to 10 plus annotations. So instead of using bean post processor classes, just by using this one, you can activate annotations. And by using this component scan, your stereotype classes you can scan and you can create the class objects. So the same stereotype annotation they given in our J2W API also. In our J2W, we have one stereotype annotation. It is similar like your component. That annotation name is @named. We have one stereotype annotation from our J2W API. Instead of using component annotation, by using named also you can configure your bean classes. Okay, so that named is similar like your component scan. Yeah, I'll show you that named annotation importance also here. And actually in case of stereotype annotations, who will create objects? IOC container will create object by scanning your packages here. And for which classes it is recommended to create object by using IOC? If that class, until unless if that class if it is not having any primitive data types dependency injection. Let's say if this DO class if it contains any primitive types dependencies like driver class name, URL, username, password, who need to pass that data? If IOC container, if it create automatically object, IOC need to pass. IOC how it can predict the driver name, URL, username, password values? It can't able to pass, right? So manually we need to do the dependency injection in case if your class if it contains any primitive data types. Okay, for primitive data types classes, component scan, this stereotype annotation is not recommended. In case if it contains also, instead of creating by using Spring, you need to create that class object. So in case if your class if it contains any primitive type, that primitive type dependencies if it have, for that class you should not use stereotype annotation. Okay, if you use stereotype annotation, Spring will take care about object creation and it will not pass any data. Just it will pass null values. So instead of giving null values manually, we need to create object and we have to pass. Okay, so stereotype in J2EE, stereotype annotation by using your J2EE named. Add all Spring 3 jar files. Actually all these jar files not required, but there we have some J2EE jars like JBoss, J2EEs. So for that jar files added here, we have J2EE libraries here. Okay, you must need to have this J2EE libraries to use this stereotypes. Yeah. Just I'll write one simple bean class here, beans. You just write two classes. Okay, you just write one car class and engine class. In engine class take some primitive types, string engine name. It is a primitive type, right? So for this class don't use any component, just leave it manually. You have to do the dependency injections and object creations for this class. Write a setter method and getter method for this engine. But for car class, if it contains any secondary type dependency, we can go through stereotypes here. You can use here auto void, or else you can use resource, or else you can go through inject. Yes. Okay, and write method here public void print engine. Engine name. Print here engine dot get engine name. Okay, so for this car class, you can use component annotation here. If I use component annotation, I no need to create this car class object. Automatically Spring will create. But if Spring will create car class object, how to get that object? We required ID, right? So without having ID also you can get object. Okay, first configure it under Spring XML file. So component scan, which package it need to scan here? The package name is beans. By scanning beans package, it need to create a car class object. Okay, and this context colon annotation hyphen config will activate your resource annotation. And you need to create engine class object here. You need to create engine class object, and in this engine class we have one dependency eng name. You have to pass that name value here. Okay, manually I am creating a engine class object. But who will inject this engine object into car? Car class object Spring will create, and into that car class this engine object also automatically it will inject. Okay, so car object creation and car into car engine dependency injection both will do automatically your IOC container. Then finally, how to get that car object here? By loading your XML document. If you want to get car object, we don't know ID, right? If you create, then you can have a ID. But if Spring creates, Spring will generate one ID. So which ID it will generate? Generally class name along with package name it have to use as a ID. In case if it not provided by using that name, we can use car dot class. Then it will provide us car reference. Then you can call your print engine method here. Okay, car engine object automatically creating. Yeah, car object automatically creating, and into car automatically it is injecting this engine object. Okay, and you can replace this annotation component annotation by using named annotation. Your J2EE named annotation also you can use here. In that case also you need to use component scan only here. Just component scan same like your component only, and you can run this. Okay, so named is similar like your component.